So then, we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original documents of the prophets of old, from the time of the prophets of Israel, the prophets of Yahweh, giving us then the understandings of the time of the end. And this time where then restoration from Mashiyach, the 61st chapter, is active. We understand wars are prohibited. And then we are transitioning ourselves then from the time of the deceit of 1,000 years ended in 6009, and we are returning to the truth, returning to the holy cities. And as we find then the pathway north of the first holy city, then we find the nation of north of Africa, then Egypt, also going through lots of transitions, government-wise, economical-wise, giving us then the proper indication of this solidifying, rebuilding time. Not only Egypt, but then north of Egypt, and then through the desert, and then up to Jerusalem. Then we must understand then from the very high north part, where then we understand where the first ramification came from, during the time of Shilimon or Solomon. Then in the spirit, this is very important, in the spirit we must understand what it meant for Israel then being the holy site or the holy city, the city of God, and what were then the relations of the nations related with the holy city. Because when you read Revelation, then you begin to understand the layers of the divine versus Gentiles. The Gentile layer, we understand China is going to come up with a system around the world where then they're going to do trade. They are the leaders of the trade of the end. Secularly speaking, 2,000 years the Mashiyach gave to the Samaritans. Started with the Samaritans, ended with the Chinese. The 2,000 years of the Samaritan simply meant the Mashiyach had to go out of his way in then completing the spring feast. Gentiles are not part of the spring feast. Try to understand, they have no part during the time of the spring feast. Where do you find Gentiles mixed with the holy completion of the spring feast? You don't find Gentiles there. You find only set apart. So what was then the Mashiyach doing when he was spending time with the Samaritans? He was then giving them 2,000 years of secular rulership. Started with the Samaritans, ended with the Chinese. The Samaritans at the time, since they were from the Gentile level, it was then a representative of then, during the time of the secular rulership of Rome, during the time. And then became other nations later. Then you read in Daniel the horns and what they meant, and some of them were then removed from its place. You understand what nations then did no longer exist. But then begin to understand then there is a layer of the prophetic on top and a layer of the secular Gentile. Started with the Samaritans and ended with the Chinese. Then we understand the Chinese, they're going to lead the world's market. The world is going to be extremely busy for the next few years. However, then the other areas of the scripture are taking place. The returning of the city, and then north of the place, Egypt, also readjusting themselves. And then up north, further north, until it reaches Jerusalem, the site of the holy city. So then when you begin to read the scripture, you understand what was then and what kind of rebuilding we are rebuilding towards. Because it's not only rebuilding the cities, we have to understand the concept. Where the first harmony came from Shilimon, from Solomon. That's when this world experienced harmony during his time. and wars had ceased. Don't we have this section of the entire scripture? You can find this, and war had ceased, meant time of harmony. Time of restoration, wars are prohibited. What does it mean? Wars then ceased. Time of harmony. Precisely the gap what Mashiyach was explaining in the Mashiyach 24 and then 6 and 7. That's where you'll find the rebuilding and wars ceased. Time of harmony. Then we must evaluate then for our understanding in the spirit, how was then the relationship from Shilimon, being in a holy city, and the nations? We have to understand those times, because we are reliving those times of the harmony for a time. So every second is counting, because we understand we have maximum of 22 years. The time is very short. Every second then counts. Discovering and rediscovering how were then the relationships of the nations in Jerusalem at the time. Those nations are not going to be restored as they were in the past. But we understand of the present time, the restoration is going to be like as it was before. In the spirit, we understand is going to be like as it was before. But then the secular trade of these nations is going to be obviously doing with the Chinese system. So then we understand the time of restoration. Because what we are aiming for is for the yet city to come. So then we relate with Shaliach Shaul in the 11th chapter of Hebrews. Always wishing for the city to come from heaven and then established in the earth. However, prior of this understanding, we must then understand how it was before. And then there is a spiritual establishment. Try to understand this very understandably. A spiritual establishment amongst the nations of the time, during the time of Israel, when Shilimon was in charge, and then the harmony of the time is going to be re-established for a time. That's when we understand the functions of the holy cities. Because the whole understanding must act in unison. Holy cities and the city. So harmony in the spirit can be re-established. While yet the world is doing trade with the leader nation of the trades of the secular level. So then you understand both layers absolutely separated. So they not only make our travel north of the land of Kush, where the city is going to be at, and then north, and then Egypt, and then further north until it reaches Jerusalem. When we have then this first stretch of the route from the land of Cush and Jerusalem, then you understand the rest and the other areas related with the harmony. A gap of time in the Mashiyach, the 24th chapter, 6th and 7th verses, spoken of by Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter. Time of restoration, time of peace, ceased from war, time of harmony. But it's not a new type of harmony. It was the harmony experienced previously. That's why then when we read the 61st chapter, and the cities that were laid waste, then it speaks of the city, and this city had a harmony for a time, perfect time of harmony. since the context of the city and the cities are then based upon a foundation of harmony, because it is a divine hand, then whatsoever we had before is returning. So it's not a new harmony, it's the harmony we was already experienced. But then as we travel north, we begin our journey. Then from Egypt, from north until reaches Jerusalem, from there we understand how then they used to have harmony in the past. Thus then the harmony with the holy city then is established. Then the cities from the land of Kush, starting with the land of Kush, then other cities are going to be built. And then as the Mashiyach said, go therefore around the world and form holy cities. So when we watch as a whole, the whole integrity then is maintained intact. It's not new. We must understand it's not new. What you think, what you hear, for you may be new because you never learned before. Speaking from the Spirit, from those that were then the oracles, guardians, from the time of their understanding, from centuries ago, it's not new. Truly it's not. It was re-establishing what was. But for a lot of people in the world it's new because they never learned. So please stay tuned. Much more coming up.